The following is a summary of the Sicha of Shabbos Parshas Ki Savo, Tofshin Nun Aleph. The Parsha of Ki Savo starts with the Mitzvah of Bikurim, of first fruits. And thereafter, the Torah tells us about Moshe Rabbeinu's entering the Jewish people into a covenant. In addition to the covenant that was at Sinai, now we have the covenant standing on the plains of Moab. And what we need to understand is, since the Sedra of Ki Savo includes and starts with the Mitzvah of Bikurim and then goes into the entire covenant with the Jewish people, what's the connection between them? After all, Mitzvah of Bikurim is a specific mitzvah, takes place in Eretz Yisrael with specific items, the 7 fruits with which the land of Israel is blessed. And there are very special times in the year when it can be brought. So how does that relate to the entire Torah of mitzvahs and the covenant for all the Torah mitzvahs? What's the connection of that covenant with the specific mitzvah of Bikurim, of the first fruits? Furthermore, what's the connection with the name of the parsha, Savoi, which means when you will come into the land? Because seemingly coming into the land is only the introduction and preparation for the mitzvah of Bikurim. But what's that got to do with the entire Torah and mitzvahs? The mitzvah of Bikurim is different than many other mitzvahs. Hakaras HaTov, giving thanks and praise to the Almighty for His benevolence, is something we do daily, but verbally. Bikurim is different. It's an action. Not only do we verbally thank God, but we actually have to pick the first fruits of our field and take them, lifnei Hashem Elokecha, to the temple, to the Beis HaMikdash, place them in a basket and bring them to the temple. Then we have to do Mikra Bikurim, which is to recite a passage of where we recall the genesis of the Jewish people, the exodus of Egypt, God bringing the Jewish people into the land, inheriting it, dividing it, sowing, and then finally reaping these first fruits. So it's very different than many other mitzvahs in the sense that it's not just verbally articulated, but it's a sense of gratitude which is actually done physically. Now let's look at the mitzvah of Bikurim in its spiritual dimension. The Jewish people are called Bikurim, first fruits. There is a verse in Hosea which says, Kavikura b'te'ena b'reishisa ro'isi avoseichem. Kodesh Yisrael Lashem reishes tevuasa. The beginning of creation, the first fruits, are the Jewish people. They are called the first fruits of the land. Just like you have first fruits of the land, so too you have first fruits of the world. Or in the words of the Midrash, Machshavtum shel Yisrael kadma l'chol davar, thought of Israel came before everything. Or in the words of Rashi at the beginning of Chumash, Bereishis, base Reishis, there are 2 things that are called Reishis. Torah is called Reishis, Israel is called Reishis. Base Reishis, the world was created for 2 things, Bishvel HaTorah, Bishvel Yisrael, for the Jewish people and for Yisrael. And of course the Midrash says, and which came before which? Yisrael Kadma LaTorah, that the thought of the Jewish souls preceded even the thought of Torah. That the Jewish people are called the first fruits doesn't just apply to souls as they preceded creation, but it also refers to souls down here in this world. Because our sages say every single individual is obligated to say, Bishvili nivra ha'olam. For me, the world is created. In other words, every single soul, whether that soul is a high-powered soul, a low-powered soul, every single soul has to say, for me, this world was created. And therefore, the true place of first fruits is Lifnei Hashem Leikacha, is in the temple, before God. The main and principal being of a Jew is their soul, is their neshama. That first fruit belongs Lifnei Hashem Elokecha, Lifnei also from the word Pnimius, in the inner dimension, which there Yisrael v'kutshabrichu kol echad. The Jewish people and God are united. Everything in the world, therefore, is a stepping stone or an intermediary to the fulfillment of the purpose. The world was created bishvil Yisrael. However, Yisrael itself is not an intermediary. It is the purpose. The tachlis, if you want, is within the soul itself. The soul itself is a first fruit, and it belongs in the temple before God. That means that everything in the life of a Jew, whether it be a holy pursuit or a mundane pursuit, or even a singular thought, speech, or action, all of it is contained within the concept of the first fruit that has to be always before Hashem. So now we understand the unique nature of the Mitzvah of Bikurim. Because by bringing the first fruits to the temple, what we are actually doing is playing out, in the physical sense, the delivery of the soul to its primary position. We are placing the true being of the Jew before God. And that is necessary in order for it to fulfill its covenant with God. And that's why Bikurim is the introduction, the first fruits are the introduction to the rest of the Sedra. Now, we mentioned beforehand that the thought of Israel precedes even that of Torah. We have a halachic precedent for this, which says that pikuach nefesh doichel kol haTorah kula, saving a life overrides the whole Torah, which means that we give precedence of the soul over the Torah. And we also have a rule, afal pi shechata yisraelhu, that even if a Jew transgresses, nevertheless, they still retain the quintessence of being a Jew. And the reason is because there's a mitzvah called Teshuva. And in that mitzvah of Teshuva, the Jew has the capability to ride above any iniquity, transgression, blemish, and return to their pristine essence, which in fact transcends Torah itself. However, since base rashis, bert rashis, the Torah was created for both the Jew and Torah, therefore Torah intrinsically is chayenu v'oirech yameinu, is our life and length of our days. And as the Rambam says, that the true inner desire of a Jew is in fact to serve Hashem. So therefore, the Seder, the normal, if you want, Seder of a Jew is that a Jew connects to God through Torah. This is what the Zohar says. There are three bonds. There is the Jew, there is the Torah, and there is God. The Jew connects to God through Torah. There is a question which is asked on this, that in fact there are not only three bonds, surely there are only two bonds. If there's the bond of the Jew connecting to Torah, that's one bond, and there's the bond of the Torah connecting with God. So why does the Zohar say there are three bonds? The answer is because there's a level of connection of the Jew with God which transcends the connection with Torah. Where do we see this manifest? We see it by a child. And especially by a child who has no open, revealed connection with Torah. Even such a Jew is essentially Bikurim, first fruits, and is connected with God. And eventually that connection will bring them, since God and the Torah are one, it will bring the Jew also to connect with Torah. That's why in the Mikra Bikurim, in the reading of Bikurim, we mention the whole episode of how Arami Oivedavi, the Aramean, wanted to destroy my father. Laban wanted to destroy Jacob. Pharaoh wanted to destroy the Jews. This all happened before the giving of the Torah. Why? Because even before the giving of the Torah, the Jewish people are Bikurim and are intrinsically connected. Bikurim require a vessel, the Samto Batena. The laws of Bikurim tell us the rich people used to put the Bikurim in a golden basket or a silver box or basket, and they would be returned to the owners. Poor people would make a basket out of willow, and it would actually remain with the Kohanim. The idea here in its spiritual dimension is that these first fruits, the pristine level of the neshama, of the soul, needs to be brought down into vessels. In other words, pristine essence needs to be translated into the physical world through physical vessels. And even the most simplest vessel is placed before God. And the reason is because that is the purpose of creation. And therefore we now understand that it says in the Parsha, Hayoim hazeh Hashem elokechem etzavcha. On this day Hashem is commanding you with a covenant. And Rashi says to us, B'chol yom yu be'einecha kachadoshim. Each day view the covenant as something completely new, fresh, out of the oven. How is that possible? By thinking about the mitzvah of first fruits, of knowing that the thought of the neshama came first, and it needs in the world today anew placing in a basket, physically performing the mitzvahs and establishing the covenant. Now we understand why it's in the Sedra of Savoy, coming. Because the coming, not just the bringing of the first fruits, but the coming, everything leading up to the bringing of the first fruits, is all part of the avodah, the service of a yid, and therefore it's all part of the first fruits. Every preparation, even a miniature, seemingly insignificant thought, speech, or action, is actually part of that master plan. This is connected with the month of Elul, the month where the king is in the field, where everybody can greet the king without any conditions attached. And consequently, in this month, we must bring, each one of us, our first fruits to the king. Physically, we must take care of those in need, Sorchei HaChag, and ultimately, the true coming will be with the coming of Mashiach, when, now that the king is in the field, we can cry out, Ad Mosai, until when will come the time that we'll be able to enter the Beis HaMikdash, and we'll be able to bring our first fruits literally, and we will be able to say, V'yanisa v'yamarta, we will be able to say the formula in the Beis HaMikdash that it should take place, B'karev Mamash.